Hi, it's been a long time since I've put out any YouTube content. I'm Kevin Ledoux, the Pragmatic Luthier. Some of you are familiar with me and some of you are not. If you're not familiar with me, I want to encourage you to look at some of my other videos. If you are familiar, you may recognize these guitars. You may have seen them in other videos in process. Um, the video started today with some pictures of these in process, I guess just to whet your appetite a little bit, and for those familiar with me to kind of reintroduce you to what I've been doing. Now, these guitars have been finished for, well, a few months. I think this one was June 11th. I finished this one June 17th, and this one not until mid-July, the 19th, I finished this one. Um, the reason I'm making this video today, I think, is kind of twofold. First of all, I want to do as best as I can an honest comparison of these guitars. Now, I want to preface this with a couple of things. First of all, this is the microphone right here, and the receiver is on the camera. This is a cheap $27 lapel microphone that I bought through Amazon. So there's not much by way of enhancement here, that's for sure. And the microphone, it is what it is. What you get is what we got. That's all I can tell you. Um, when I say I want to make an assessment of these, I'm going to make a comparison, and my assessment is not going to be at all objective. It's going to be a subjective assessment, my impressions of what I got as a result of what I'm doing. So my tonal goal with these instruments was to increase the bass a little bit, not just in volume, but I wanted it to be a nice round bass with harmonics clearly present. Um, I guess I wanted balance as well. As I said, I don't want the bass to overpower the instrument, but I needed balance. But I also like a lot of sustain in an instrument. I find that very, very pleasing, probably because I'm a fingerstyle player. Um, but I also like a quality in my guitars that I'll refer to as shimmer. I like that word because it describes to me beautifully the tone quality that I'm after. So that was the goal. And now the question is, well, did you get there or not? How close to the bullseye did you actually hit? Um, but I did it by taking another instrument body that I build and re-examining another couple of them, in fact. And what I did was I pulled a little bit of real estate out of the waist. I increased the width of the top here at the waist only slightly, but I lengthened the top beyond another couple of instruments that I build by 3/4 of an inch, maybe even a little bit more. And I reduced the size of the sound hole just a little bit. My theory being that by making the top longer, it's just like making a string longer. It's easier to get a bass tone out of a longer string than it is a little short string. Consider even if you tuned a mandolin string down to the low E in a guitar, it would just sit there and flop. So my idea being that at this scale length, which these are all 25.4, my idea being that with the initial excitement of an up and down movement and then that dipole, I guess they call it, movement, that I might increase the presence of that bass just a little bit more. And by reducing the sound hole size, I would increase the compression inside the sound chamber and the rarefaction along with it. So I'm going to show you each guitar individually. I will play them and describe what I think are the differences. Please keep in mind, again, that all of this is my opinion. This is subjective. Well, I'm going to start with this guitar, probably because in its own way, it's the real oddball of the bunch. First of all, if you're not familiar, don't remember from previous videos, this guitar is made of northeastern white ash, harvested very locally. This was harvested within 5 miles of where I live. I had this sawn probably 15 years ago. It's very nice material. I like it. It is trimmed in Bocote. The fingerboard and bridge and the headpiece overlay are also Bocote, and as is the rosette. The top is conventional spruce and a lower grade. I believe this is a 2A top. But what's weird about this instrument, if you can say it's weird, is that it has that aluminum bridge patch that you saw earlier in the video. Uh, my goal there was to see, literally, to see what that was going to do. I mean, that was really a crapshoot. And I got better results than I expected to. In the end, I thought the guitar would turn out to be quite tinny, but I don't find it that way. So it is very bright, unquestionably. One of the nice things about this, I suppose, is I'll never have to replace the bridge patch. Um, but it is quite bright. I find it powerful. I like the delivery. I like the percussiveness. I love the sustain. And keep in mind, I'm not a real great player, so don't expect a concert here. But there we are. Now, you may think a lot differently about these instruments than I do, but this is my subjective assessment. I should also mention, by the way, all of these guitars are X-braced, the same pattern, but I may have varied the X angle, the angle of the tone bars, and so on, uh, to achieve the tone that I was after based on my perceived stiffness and tap tones involved in the top material itself. Those are major differences, I suppose, inside. But even then, those angles probably didn't change much by more than 3-4 degrees. And all of the backs in these guitars were X-braced, and they were all X-braced the same way. And I think I mentioned before, these are all 25.4-inch scale lengths. So there's the first one. Um, this second one here, this is quite nice. I, I've come to really sort of like this guitar. At first, I wasn't too sure, but I changed the nut. I had a brass nut in this, and it was a failure. I did not like it. But this is a nice, tasty piece of maple that a friend of mine gave me. Bernd Kraus. He's a mountain dulcimer builder here locally. Look him up on Facebook. He's a terrific guy and he's a good builder. Um, and I could only get the back out of the piece of wood that he gave me, 3-piece at that. And I had some older, mildly curly maple that I use for the rims in this. And by the way, this happens to be a laminated rim. The very first one that I ever did turned out real well. We're trimmed in walnut, and the rosette is bog oak, very old. Just simple leaf inlays in there, nothing really fancy. The fingerboard and bridge are Brazilian cherry. I've come to like Brazilian cherry for these purposes. It obviously has the density, but I like the color of it. It can be used, I think, very artfully in the construction of an instrument. It can really do a lot aesthetically. And the neck is something a little bit different for me. This neck is Douglas fir. I decided to use it because I've heard some talk about electric guitars occasionally favoring Douglas fir, and I thought, give that a try. And I happened to have some around that I could get a neck out of, so I went ahead with that. So anyway, here's this one. Now this one I really like. I really like the color of the tone in this, and I love that shimmer. To me, this is a really nice, for my purposes, this is a nice rich instrument, and it's got power. I should also add to the conversation that all of these guitars are strung with the same strings. These happen to be a light gauge set of the GHS thin core bronze. I have come to admire these strings greatly. I love the flexibility of those bass strings. So there's that one. I find this one very exciting. I think a little bit brighter, not brighter, but a little bit louder, a little bit more. I can only describe it by saying lung power, you might say, than this one. If you had to describe any of these three as tinny, this one would be more along those lines. Now, I didn't mention the top in this one, and if you're not familiar with any of the previous videos I did, or you may have forgotten, this top is unusual. This top was a barn board on the side of a barn. This piece of hemlock is known to be at least 140 years old, and it took 4 pieces across here to get a complete top out of it. And that's the reason for its color. Otherwise, this would be, a silvery, creamy gray cast sort of look if it was new material. But this was really worth building it. It's very nice, and I like this. It's just a really nice guitar. I pick this up almost every day. Now this last one, uh, let's get that in there correctly. This last one is one that I truly, really just like. Now this one is a little bit more demure than that, as you heard that first chord. It's a little bit softer tone. But there's that sustain, and that shimmer is there to my mind. I love the balance. This is another one that I particularly like. Now, I think you may agree that these are all very similar in tone, and I guess you would expect that. I think their tone is flavored more by the fact that we have 3 guitars and tops of 3 different species. Um, the top in this guitar is 4 pieces, and I'm at a point where I cannot tout this stuff enough because I've used it enough times. This is northeastern white pine, and this is a log that I had sawn, I believe, 4 years ago, and I had it dried, and I split it up into some tops and further dried it in the shop, and I've begun to use it. I've done other white pine tops from other sources, but this is the first one out of the log that I selected and had sawn. Uh, Pine tops they're a risk. When you open a pine log, those of you that saw logs will know this, but when you open a pine log, you might get good stuff and you might get 2 boards and then hit knots, and that's all you get. It's kind of a crapshoot, I guess. So I was lucky. I chose a good log. I got a lot of nice quartered pine out of it, but it's 4 piece. The sawyer that did the work sort of missed the boat on the quarter sawing, and well, I bought the lumber anyway because I have no problem with a multiple piece top. Uh, this one, as I said, white pine. This is common butternut back and rims, and its neck is also butternut, which I genuinely like. I've done a couple of bass guitars in this, I think 2 or 3 bass guitars with it. I've done other 6-string guitars with it, this being one of them. And I like this. It's very lightweight. This guitar weighs very little. And this back, excuse me, is very flexible. So I think it contributes a little bit to that low end. And I like it very much. I also want to point out a slight difference in a couple of these is a brass bridge saddle. This is something I've come to really admire very recently, and I'm going to use it more often. Um, I have done a couple of instruments with both a brass nut and saddle, and it can be wonderful. Um, with the one I pointed out before, not so much the case. I think probably because I had the nut cut too low, but I thought it put too much of a tinny shine on it. So there are the three guitars. Um, so I guess the question is, did I meet my goal? Did I hit the target? And I'm going to say yes, I did. Um, in fact, I think a little better than I expected. That's nice because it helps cement an understanding of what you're doing or what you have been doing. But there's also another upside to it. It creates more questions and it suggests more ideas, which I'm now looking forward to. Um, I'm going to be taking some more steps now to increase the entire body size and see if I can maintain that same shimmer, making a guitar that's a little more powerful, uh, maybe a little bit looking for a little bit more volume. So there's so many directions to go in. Uh, I just want to say another quick word. I hope I'm not repeating myself about tonal goal. When you're first building, it's almost impossible for someone to say, well, what is your tonal goal? It's impossible to answer that. And this is not just my invention. Kent Carlos Everett made a big issue out of naming your ideal tone. If you watch a video that he did at the Red Rocks Community College in Colorado, um, he talked a lot about voicing tops and he talked about what is your tonal goal. And other people have described the same thing. Bill Cumpiano and John Nadelson in their book talked about a luthier arriving at a familiar end when they voiced their tops, suggesting that there was a tonal goal. I'm sure every builder does the same thing. As you build, keep in mind what you've got and what you were hoping for each time you started that instrument, and as you voiced your tops and your backs and so on. And after you've made that comparison, maybe that will, or it should, I hope, suggest changes or things that you would like to do to make your guitars closer to your ideal sound. Anyway, hope I haven't been too repetitive here. Kevin Ledoux again, the pragmatic luthier and the largest manufacturer of guitars in the entire town of Triangle, New York. If you're not familiar with my channel or if you've not subscribed, please subscribe. I'd appreciate that. And I'd love it if you'd put a like on this video. And I hope you got something out of this, a little bit more than just some entertainment. Thanks for watching. Be back soon.